Oh, hi there. It is Thursday, Thematic Thursday. Welcome everyone. It's funny. I was flipping through my book here, and a piece of paper fell out. Hey, Dover Cook, welcome. And at first I was like, oh, it's a blank piece of paper. But then I looked really closely, and it's an ancient thermal receipt. And I was like, what is it? So if I hold it up just at the right light, it's actually the receipt from when I bought this book uh, when I was at UCLA 20 years ago. Wow, that's something. That's something that'll make you feel old. 20 years ago. Anyway, hi everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Thursday. I came up with a theme for today that I thought might be fun. Hello everyone. We'll let people filter their way in. I know we are all old. It's true. And getting older by the minute, which is crazy. Yeah, it was so funny because I thought it was blank, and I was like, no, there are words. Amazingly enough, this book was only $12 when I bought it. Interesting. And I had some sort of a discount, apparently. Yes. So anyway, we're going to talk about myth as it pertains to sort of looking at different stories and figuring out how they are similar and what they tell us about the human condition and what we as humans want to get out of stories and myths and legends and things like that. And sort of the way a couple of old white dudes, felt that all of that worked. And it's interesting because some of it has been proven to be more or less correct, and some of it has been proven to be not so correct. So this applies to sort of all stories. The idea is I'm gonna be jumping around a little bit, but we'll get there. And if anybody knows about this stuff, feel free to talk about it in chat. I'm not an expert on Joseph Cambell, but we'll just talk about it. So the idea is that if you look at enough stories from around the world, that you can find similarities between the stories, similar elements, similar themes, and then once you have all of those, you can figure out, okay, well, why do all of these specific things happen so often in stories that are seemingly unconnected? What does that say either about where these stories come from, or what does this say about people that are coming up with these stories that have these similar things across different civilizations, across different times, all this other stuff? Let me try to figure out my angles. Hopefully the camera should be a little bit better today than usual because I'm using the real camera. All right, so where does all of this start? Well, Joseph Cambell is an interesting fellow to talk about, but he wasn't the first one to make an attempt like this. Before him was a guy, Sir James George Fraser, who he died in 1941. But he wrote this massive tome called The Golden Bough. It's huge. I have read this before. It's been a while, and it's very interesting. Now, Fraser was a social anthropologist and a folklorist. He was a dude who he had access to a lot of books, and he read a lot of books, and he was looking at different things, and he figured, oh, well, if we look at this and we look at this, and how are these connected, and is everything kind of are again, it's like what we were talking about. Are these stories similar from this and this? And he drew all these parallels between different stories and tried to come up with these archetypes. Like these stories are similar, so they're all like the story of the serpent and that kind of stuff. The problem is a lot of what he did was fairly superficial reading. Hey, Erdensk, welcome everyone. And as it turns out, he kind of just made stuff up as he went along. And yes, I mean, obviously there are parallels that you can draw between these stories that are sort of obvious on the surface and they're interesting to talk about. But he didn't really go and learn all the languages and figure out what all the original sources were, and he applied some later and especially Christian ideas to some of the stuff that he was looking at. So it's kind of like, well, it's interesting, but it's not all necessarily accurate. Unfortunately, a lot of those same issues come up in Joseph Cambell. Joseph Cambell, who was, let's see, he died in 1987, which is interesting, not that long ago, especially for those of us who are a little bit older. He too, so he was a professor of literature, smart guy, very smart guy. Read a lot of things, traveled around the world, dabbled a little bit in some other languages, although that also is controversial. He talks a lot about Sanskrit, but then apparently experts at the language later on were saying, well, he didn't really understand it all that well. But anyway, he's very famous for doing what Fraser did before, and essentially looking at a bunch of stories, drawing parallels, finding similarities, and then trying to explain what it all meant. So what did Campbell say? Well, first of all, he broke it down into different civilizations have, what is it called? What did he call it? The evolution of myth is the different ways. Hey, Demon Blight, congratulations on getting a job today. That's fantastic. This is an especially difficult time for everybody, especially when it comes to employment. That is great. Cheers to you. Yeah, so Campbell don't forget you're trying to read it again. Yeah, it doesn't all hold up. So what did Campbell say? So first of all, Campbell took a look at, he said, okay, we're going to look at these ancient cultures. We have to figure out what they were talking about, and we need some classifications. So he classified ancient cultures as sort of a progression, right? So things start with the way of the animal powers. So this is looking at the earliest stages of humans as thinking beings, and once they start trying to figure out how they exist in the world and how they exist with supernatural elements. So here we see humans being very animalistic in their beliefs. They're great animal spirits that are around, and we see this in Native American stuff and South American stuff. And again, as you'll see, Joseph Cambell, he picked and found a lot of things to support his narrative. Not exactly a scientific method, and again, a fair amount of this has been debunked. But I'm just going through what he did, and then we'll talk about how it is interesting, if nothing else, and useful in storytelling in general. So anyway, so the earliest people were they were animistic, right? They believed in animal spirits. It helped them understand how animals were important and sacred or holy, but also were killing them and eating them and using their body parts. So just me saying that should bring to mind probably things that you've seen about Native American stuff. Also, again, other cultures similarly. Then once people stop being hunting and gathering and start actually sowing crops, then you get the way of the seeded earth. So this is moving into actual agriculture. And then we get things like, here, according to Joseph Cambell, now we finally get into things like the Earth Mother, that whole archetype, right? Because we're getting things from the ground now, right? We're growing things, we're interacting with nature, so we're getting more into cycles, things dying and rebirth, regrowing, right? Because you harvest a crop, fields go fallow, and then things regrow after that. So that's all good stuff. And then we get the way of the celestial lights. So this is one of the parts where Campbell may have gotten some stuff right. So there's an idea in a lot of these cultures that we talk about, all of these ancient cultures, that while we read a lot about mythology, Greek mythology, Norse mythology, mythology out of India, and Egyptian mythology, where there's usually a sky god, and the sky god is in charge of things. Again, Norse mythology switches it up a little bit because Thor is the sky god, but he's not the king of the gods. He's not Odin. Odin doesn't have the same sky powers that Thor does, whereas in most of the other pantheons, it's the sky god who's the king of the gods. Anyway, most of the mythology that we talk about have that sort of ideal, right? The men are in charge, or a male character is in charge, often related to the sky, things like that. Female characters, even the Earth Mother character, which exists in a lot of these mythologies, is somewhat subservient, a wife, a daughter, something like that. And there's this theory that what happened is that previous generations revered the Earth Mother much more, and then external influences and meeting other cultures brought in these ideas of the sky god, and that took over. So essentially people in the way of the seeded earth time worshipped the Earth Mother more, and then later on switched to moving the sky god, the male character, over. And this comes from the Indo-European people and also Semitic people with their male-oriented, male-dominated religions. Again, some of this can sort of be proven, some of it can't, but it is interesting to talk about. Yes, a lot of cherry picking data is for sure what went on with some of this. Yeah, so this is then like I said, the way of these celestial lights, as far as sky gods, right? Things up in the sky, and the male aspect. And then the final stage, as Joseph Cambell referred to it, is the way of man. So this is how we get more intricate stories, more stories about how people interact with each other. Sort of by this point, we've gotten, okay, we can hunt, we can gather, we can plant, we have agriculture, we can understand a fair amount of the world around us. Now we're more interested in how humans interact with each other. We get love stories, we get stories of faith, and how humans can understand worship and things like that. Okay, so those are the ways. This is the way, right? These are the ways in which cultures have evolved relating to their mythologies. Again, according to Joseph Cambell. I will take a drink. So what does myth serve? Why is myth important for people everywhere? Well, according to Joseph Cambell, it serves, four functions. The first function is the mystical metaphysical. So this is the big why questions. Why do we exist? What are we on the earth for? How do we interact with whatever is beyond us? So it's just the mystical metaphysical. Next is cosmological. This makes sense. We've talked about this a lot in different mythologies. Where did everything come from? Well, myth explains that, right? Then there's the sociological function. So this is, how do people live and interact in a way that doesn't annihilate culture all the time? And we've talked about that a lot of times, right? All of these ideas of justice, of moving forward to a system of justice from a system of vengeance and murdering each other. This is how we get guest friendship and working with other people, and laws of giving gifts and things like that. So all of those that's super important to mythology everywhere. And that might actually be something that Campbell downplayed a little bit. And then what the last one is what he calls the pedagogical psychological function. And then that's sort of how you deal with the stages of life, right? We're children. What's that liminal point where you are a child growing into an adult, adult moving to getting married, having kids, and then later in life and dying? So how do we deal with all of that mentally? How do we deal with it in relating to other people? So those are the functions of myths. So Campbell looked loud children, I apologize. So Campbell looked at all this stuff, tried to figure out, okay, well, this is why humans have myth, use it to explain all these things. Again, a lot of it is really early science, humans' attempt at explaining things, which is really cool, I think. And then he said, okay, well, looked at all these things. Let's figure out what this tells us about stories of heroes and legends. So Joseph Cambell wrote a book called Hero with 1,000 Faces. And the idea is that there is this monomyth, this prototypical story of a legendary hero, and that elements of it are in all of these different stories all over the world, all over different time periods. I'm sorry, Rabid Wombat. And yeah, I know. It's just sometimes the children just start screaming, and it's like, well, oh well. Yeah. So then, and again, it's he went a little bit too far, and well, we can see this everywhere, and every story is like this. Again, not every story, but so many stories. The book came out in 1949, by the way, if you want to check it out. And then, yeah, and it became popular, and people talked about it a lot. Now, it really became popular with, there was a TV series that was talking to Joseph Cambell about this stuff. His books were very popular, and then essentially it was Star Wars, right? Star Wars. George Lucas was a big fan of Joseph Cambell, really loved this idea of this monomyth, this sort of inherent story that we're all trying to tell. It's very psychological. Joseph Cambell was a big fan of psychology, Freud and Jung especially. So George Lucas, big fan, talked about this a lot and sort of patterned Star Wars, or at least Luke's journey, off of this hero's journey from Joseph Cambell. So let's talk about the hero's journey, and we'll go through the pattern, and let's find out. Yeah, exactly, Dovercook, the PBS series. All right, so let's talk about the pattern, and again, even if some of this has been debunked, that Joseph Cambell cherry-picked some stuff, found evidence where it necessarily wasn't, ignored stories that didn't quite follow along, ignoring all that, just taking this sort of at face value that this is an interesting idea, that there are lots of similarities, certainly, between all these stories, and they do influence us, and they do sort of, and even it's on another level, the idea is that even if not all of these things are truly part of the ancient cultures and the ancient stories, these elements do make for a good story that resonates with most people. That's really what we can get out of a lot of Joseph Campbell's stuff, right? There's a reason why this concept is so popular, why George Lucas was able to turn this into Star Wars that, the entire planet appreciates and loves, at least at times. So let's go through the journey, and I want your help in talking about what stories that ancient, modern, whatever, have these elements as we go through them. I thought that would be cool, right? So what is the hero's journey? In brief, in Hero with 1,000 Faces, Campbell describes it as a hero ventures ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. Fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won. The hero comes back from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. Interesting. Right. Joseph Cambell, father of Andy Campbell. Grandfather, maybe. Oh, and there's this cool little image somebody made. Let me grab this real quick. Ooh, can I drop an SVG file into Streamlabs? Let's find out. I'm gonna guess that no, I can't. Boo. Well, I can, except it looks like this. Transparent background. Womp womp. The picture isn't important. I'll take that down in a second. But essentially, again, we have the hero at the top. He dives into adventure. Different things happen along the way. There's death and rebirth there at the bottom. And then boop, 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 and there is a return. Excuse me. All right, I'm going to get rid of that picture because it doesn't look very good. I'm going to try to get rid of the picture. Remove. Okay. Cool. All right. So, summary. Get to the thing. Okay. We have 17 stages. And again, unknown unknowns. Oh, so many unknown unknowns. Again, we'll definitely reference things that we have talked about and read here on stream and things that we're going to very soon. But yes, obviously you'll see a lot of the elements of this were in Beowulf. Not all of them. And again, Campbell sort of hedged his bets and his definitions. He's like, well, these are the thematic elements that show up all over the place, but not everyone is in every story. It's like, all right, well, I mean, it's kind of like a fortune teller. You'll meet a strange person. Well, I mean, okay, everybody eventually meets some strange people. All right, so we start with the call to adventure. And it's sort of described as the hero begins a situation of normality from which some information is received that acts as a call to head off into the unknown. Now, clearly, we can list off a million things where this happens, right? Essentially, the idea is the story starts out with a mundane scenario. The hero, who we as the viewer, the reader, we don't know yet who the hero is going to be. The hero doesn't know that he is going to be a hero. It's a normal, everyday life. Now, this ties into what I was talking about the other day with trying to read the Wheel of Time books. And this also applies to Lord of the Rings and so many other stories where at the beginning it's just mundane life. And depending on the author or the filmmaker or whatever it is, these scenes can go on and on and on and be too much. So clearly this is something we see in, yes, Frodo Baggins. Harry Potter is a good one. Yes, absolutely. Luke Skywalker, of course, is living a sort of a very boring, mundane, average life. Doesn't know that he's going to be a hero, right? And then, yes, and then something, there's a call to adventure. Something, Shannara series, yep. Spider-Man, interesting. Yeah, comic book heroes often follow this trend. Not always, obviously. There's some different things going on there. Pawn of Prophecy, Robotech, sure. Yeah, I mean, again, yeah, let's hit me up with all of them. So yeah, so then there's usually some sort of message or messenger, and the examples that I'm reading here are Gandalf, right? Gandalf comes and asks for Frodo's help. Luke Skywalker literally gets a message from Princess Leia. So again, George Lucas, big fan of this monomyth, will be using a lot of these very specifically in Star Wars, as we'll see. Now here is where, again, Campbell says, sometimes, not always, but sometimes after this, there is a refusal of the call. And the hero says no for a variety of reasons. Feels like he can't live up to it, feels like he has to stay. And again, I will say he, because a lot of what Joseph Campbell wrote is that the hero is almost always male. Certainly doesn't have to be, and I'd love to hear if we can come up with ideas or stories where it's a female character going through these things. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so again, talking about Star Wars, like, oh no, I couldn't possibly do this. And then part of the refusal of the call is then the hero initially refuses, and then something else more forcibly kicks him out of his mundane life and sort of really pushes him on the journey, right? And so again, Star Wars, Luke initially says, no, I can't do that. And then the stormtroopers come and murder his family. Okay, well, now I can't stay here. I'm going to go on an adventure. But the hero gets going, is going to head off. And then here's a really cool part of it. Frank Thorne's Gita of Holazar. Ooh, I don't know that one. But I want to. Come on. Oh, that didn't work. Gita of Holazar. Yeah, I think you hit on a really good one with Spider-Man. I think we're going to see Gita of Alazar. Cool. I will look that up later. Okay, Savage Punch. That's true. I don't want to. I don't want to offend the stormtroopers and mischaracterize their actions on Tatooine. Hey, Mexican Robin. Yes. Okay, so the hero is about to set off on the quest. Well, what does the hero need? Aha. Ooh, Dover Cook. That's cool. I saved the name. I'll definitely check that out. So then the hero needs help, right? Especially because in these stories, the hero starts off in very mundane. It's not really a hero yet, right? So the hero needs supernatural aid. Oh, what do we got? Thank you very much for hosting, Darrow. I appreciate that. So the hero needs supernatural aid. And there's some sort of a guide, a magical helper. Yep, Alan on the Druid. Obviously, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And then Gandalf, right, for Tolkien. So and again, it doesn't, right, and it's not necessary. So the idea is supernatural in the idea that it's just beyond what the hero knows, right? So I mean, again, we could talk a lot about, are the Jedi supernatural or not, based on the true definition of it, but supernatural. I don't know. Even in Robotech, you could argue that Lang deciphering the secrets of robotechnology sort of creates the supernatural, and then they use that as weapons. I don't know. I mean, again, with Joseph Cambell, it's not so much that all of this is right or wrong in all these stories. It's just sort of how you can apply it to the hero's journey. So yeah, I mean, if it works, it works. It's all good. It's all good. So we have supernatural aid, and again, this is to get the hero to get the hero to understand the wider world around him. Right? Luke has to learn about the Force, and the Force is going to inform him of not only his own power, but literally how things work around him, history, and things like, yeah, certainly protoculture. I think protoculture and the idea, yeah, of robotechnology could definitely be applied to the supernatural in these stories. Although eventually we'll talk more about the weapon, right? We haven't gotten the weapon yet. It's in here somewhere, I think. I don't know, maybe I'm mixing that up. All right, so we have supernatural aid. Also, the movie Krull, which is one of my absolute favorites. Hero's Journey, man, all the way. It hit all of these things. And it's also very similar to Star Wars, just in a part fantasy, part sci-fi setting. Okay, so then we get to crossing the first threshold. Now, this is kind of an obvious one. If the hero's going to go on a journey, there's going to be some sort of initial adventure, initial conflict that he goes through. So the hero goes forward in his adventure until he comes to the Threshold Guardian at the entrance to the Zone of Magnified Power. I love these descriptions. Such custodians bound the world in 4 directions, also up and down, standing for the limits of the hero's present sphere or life horizon. Beyond them is darkness, the unknown and danger, just as beyond the parental watch is danger to the infant, and beyond the protection of his society, danger to the members of the tribe. So again, tying the hero's journey to sort of taking a step back and looking at this in all of mythology and what mythology does for humans. Sort of truth. Sure. So again, this is basically like there's an initial conflict that enforces the idea that the hero has to go on this journey and go do something crazy. And this one is kind of tricky because, again, like, every hero going on a journey is going to go on a journey and interact with different things on the journey. So where is this first threshold? It's kind of more of an amorphous idea, but the thing I'm looking at here, Shrek is an interesting one to look at as far as the hero's journey. But this one describes the Tuscan Raiders as the crossing of the first threshold for Luke. I don't know. Why not? Sure. Okay, so then next up, and we're still in the first part of the heading off onto the journey. Then we get what Campbell described as the belly of the whale. So the belly of the whale represents the final separation from the hero's known world and self. By entering this stage, the person shows willingness to undergo a metamorphosis. When first entering the stage, the hero may encounter a minor danger or setback. Okay, again, that's pretty obvious. The idea that the passage of the magical threshold is a transit into a sphere of rebirth is symbolized in the worldwide womb image of the belly of the whale. The hero, instead of conquering or conciliating the power of the threshold, is swallowed into the unknown and would appear to have died. So there, yeah. Okay. So again, obviously, belly of the whale comes from the story of Jonah in the Bible. What else is it talking about here? And then, oftentimes this actually takes the form of going down into something or literally being swallowed. Yeah, exactly. Jonah. Literally being swallowed and then coming back, going down and coming back up, entering something and coming back out. Again, as we talked about, there's Campbell made a lot of these things vague enough that you could sort of find it everywhere. Really. So talking about Empire Strikes Back, and yep, the Millennium Falcon flies into a cave that turns out to be a giant space slug. Yeah. We can look at this in terms of, well, I mean, Beowulf he doesn't go down into... He kills Grendel before he... Well, I mean, depending on how you look at it. If Grendel... If the fight with Grendel is the first... what do we call it here? Is the first threshold, and then the belly of the whale would be going down to fight Grendel's mom, and then coming back up. That would work. It's Joseph Campbell, of course it works. yeah, exactly. Yes, Demon Bite, exactly. Yeah, and we're gonna get more about death and rebirth too. So again, so many of these things can be they overlap. You can look at them in different ways. Okay, so the hero is finally on his way, right? And we're in the next section called initiation. So what does initiation entail? Well, first off is the Road of Trials, a series of tests that the hero must undergo to begin the transformation. Campbell describes it as, once having traversed the threshold, the hero moves in a dream landscape of curiously fluid, ambiguous forms, where he must survive a succession of trials. This is a favorite phase of the myth adventure. It has produced a world literature of miraculous tests and ordeals. So again, essentially this is traveling, fighting monsters, figuring out puzzles, and literally every story ever written has this, because every story is about characters doing things. So this one is kind of like the most obvious, the Road of Trials. I don't think we need to dwell on that one for too long, frankly. So this one's cool. The Meeting with the Goddess. So this is partly connected to a female power, a power greater, a power that's connected to the supernatural that we've already seen, but on a sort of a different level. And then also, this is where you get a tool, a weapon, a special item. So Campbell says, the ultimate adventure, when all the barriers and ogres have been overcome, is commonly represented as a mystical marriage of the triumphant hero soul with the queen goddess of the world. The meeting with the goddess, who is incarnate in every woman, is the final test of the talent of the hero to win the boon of love, which is life itself, enjoyed as the encasement of eternity. And when the adventurer in this context is not a youth, but a maid, she is the one who, by her qualities, her beauty, or her yearning, is fit to become the consort of an immortal. Then the heavenly husband descends to her and conducts her to his bed, whether she will or not. And if she has shunned him, the scales fall from her eyes. If she has sought him, her desire finds its peace. Yes, Lady in the Lake, excellent. Yeah, and Theseus and the Minotaur, yeah, this could be Ariadne giving him the sword to go in. Yep. And what this immediately brought to mind, and there's a note here, so I didn't fully think of this all on myself, but Galadriel, big one, right? Meeting this goddess figure, super powerful female figure who gives knowledge, explains the world, tells the hero what's going on in other places, and then of course tools, items, and weapons. Erdansk. I'm not going to disagree with that. In the movie Krull, this again, total hero's journey thing, but there's a... In that one, though, it's interesting because the hero himself doesn't go and meet the goddess. It's the hero's mentor who goes and meets the goddess, but then brings back the information to the hero, which is kind of cool. And again, Joseph Campbell would say, great, a variation on the theme. It fits in just as well. And it does, it's fine. Okay, so we have some sort of a female god, and Campbell does talk there explicitly, though, that they're more rare, but in stories where it's a female hero, there's a slightly different version, right? The female hero is encountering a male power or a male divinity, and there will be some sort of love there, whether the female hero goes through with it or not, and then it can branch in different ways. Sure. Okay, but next is the woman as the temptress. In this step, the hero faces those temptations, often of a physical or pleasurable nature, that may lead him to abandon or stray from his quest. Woman is a metaphor for the physical or material temptations of life, since the hero knight was often tempted by lust from his spiritual journey. Let's see. Campbell says, generally, we refuse to admit within ourselves or within our friends the fullness of that pushing, self-protective, malodorous, carnivorous, lecherous fever, which is the very nature of the organic cell. Sure. The seeker of the life beyond life. The seeker of the life beyond life must press beyond the woman, surpass the temptations of her call, and soar to the immaculate ether beyond. Okay. So what are some examples of this? Sirens, great one. Yep. And then also, Calypso tempting Odysseus. I mean, it happens a lot with Odysseus. Circe too. This one gives a Star Wars example in that Luke is beguiled by Leia despite her being his sister. Sure. Why not? Odysseus was a hound. Oh yeah. Odysseus had a lot of pleasures along the way, not just hardships. And again, the idea here too is that it's not necessarily sexual, but it's more of like a distraction of the hero finding something pleasurable or distracting in this world that could distract or turn him away from his ultimate goals. And then, so once the hero gets back on his way, in theory, we get atonement with the Father or the Abyss. So what does that mean? Yeah, Luke was that's a good one actually for Luke. Yeah, his temptation. Why because he was training and then he abandoned his training, abandoned his life path to become a hero, to go and be with his friends. I mean, save his friends, yes, but yeah, to go and be with them instead. So in this next step, the hero must confront and be initiated by whatever holds the ultimate power in his life. In many myths and stories, this is the father or a father figure who has life and death power. This is the center point of the journey. Campbell says, atonement consists in no more than the abandonment of that self-generated double monster. The dragon thought to be God, superego, and the dragon thought to be sin, repressed id. But this requires an abandonment of the attachment to ego itself. And that is what is difficult. One must have a faith that the Father is merciful, and then a reliance on that mercy. Okay. In this ordeal, the hero may derive hope and assurance from the helpful female figure by whose magic he is protected through all the frightening experiences of the Father's ego-shattering initiation. For if it is impossible to trust the terrifying Father face, then one's faith must be centered elsewhere. And with that reliance for support, one endures the crisis only to find in the end that the father and mother reflect each other and are in essence the same. Yeah. So again, confronting father, which again, even before Campbell describes it, pretty common, pretty well-known thing. Lots of stories from the beginning of time dealing with dad, confronting father, overcoming father, and one either successfully or not. It kind of doesn't matter. It's just the idea of at some point in the journey, you have to face what your father did, good or bad, what your father means, and again, sort of understanding your father's power. And right, exactly, Aaron. This is universal, really. Yes, so obviously, Empire Strikes Back. I am your father. No. Lots of good father elements in these stories. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to actually be the biological father, right? It's more dealing with like a father figure. We get this a lot with the Primarchs in Warhammer. If you go back and read the Horus Heresy novels, lots and lots of daddy issues among those characters. Big time. Next up, we have apotheosis, the point of realization in which a greater understanding is achieved. Armed with new knowledge and perception, the hero is resolved and ready for the more difficult part of the adventure. Let's see. Campbell says, those who know not only that the everlasting lies in them, but that they and all things... this is complicated. Okay, well, anyway, there's the idea of it's essentially this comes down to a breakthrough and a change, either of understanding or of form. So we have Gandalf going from gray to white. What I'm reading here talks about Sherlock Holmes working, and then the aha moment, and that's a transformation. I don't know. I mean, sure, why not? So any sort of bridge between moving ahead and then there's some sort of a break, and it can be death related or not, just a change of form to accept the new scenario and propel you on your journey. And again, the idea with all of these things is that all of these are elements. They don't all have to be in one story. Some of them can overlap. Some of them can be described in different ways. But yes, apotheosis coming back. Then we have the ultimate boon. The ultimate boon is the achievement of the goal of the quest. It is what the hero went on the journey to get. All previous steps serve to prepare and purify the hero for this step. Since in many myths the boon is something transcendent, like the elixir of life itself, plant that supplies immortality, the Holy Grail, things like that. Let's see. What the hero seeks through this intercourse with them is therefore not finally themselves, but their grace. Blah, 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 blah. This is the miraculous energy of the thunderbolts of Zeus, the fertility of the reign of Viracocha, the virtue announced by the bell rung in the mass at the consecration, and the light of the ultimate illumination of the saint and sage. Its guardians dare release it only to the duly proven. Campbell's fun to read, even if not all of it was necessarily properly researched. He was a fantastic writer, just so full of imagery in what he talked about. So this is the accomplishment of what the hero set out to do. Now again, this is not the end of the story. It's just fulfilling that original challenge, you might say. So we talk about here, that's the destroying the One Ring, destroying the Death Star, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, drinking from the Holy Grail. Yeah, exactly, Indiana Jones. Let's see. What is the ultimate boon in Jerry Maguire? Yeah, well, again, so here the ultimate boon is what the hero set out to do fairly specifically. And then again, we're not at the end of the journey. We're at this is part of the journey, and there's still more to come. So yeah, this would be I think this would be the contract. But I don't know. I mean, all of this is open to interpretation. So then the next part of the journey is the return, right? The hero has left, gone through all of these stages, gotten power, interacted with the goddess or, something transcendent, got a tool or a weapon to do the job, makes it to that point where he confronts what the initial challenge was, has defeated it, and now the return. So what's the first part of the return section? The refusal of the return. Having found bliss and enlightenment in the other world, the hero may not want to return to the ordinary world to bestow the boon onto his fellow man. The adventurer still must return with his life-transmuting trophy. The full round, the norm of the monomyth, requires that the hero shall now begin the labor of bringing the runes of wisdom, the golden fleece, the sleeping princess, back into the kingdom of humanity, where the boon may redound to the renewing of the community, the nation, the planet, or the 10,000 worlds. But the responsibility has been frequently refused. Okay. Again, the examples that I give. So immediately after destroying the ring, Frodo is so exhausted he wants to give up and die rather than make the return journey home. Okay, I guess. And then it says Sherlock Holmes tends to overstay his welcome at the scene of the crime. Sure, I suppose. Why not? Ooh, that sounds good, Darrow. I like Impossible Burgers. But yeah, some hesitation to return. I don't know. Those are stretching. Yeah, I'm not sure. What I'm reading here doesn't have any more good examples. But yeah, if there's well, I guess you could see this in Beowulf, right? Beowulf kills Grendel's mom, comes back, and then doesn't Hrothgar ask him to stay? So that would be that could follow this, right? But then Beowulf says, no, I gotta go. I have to go back home. Something like that might be. Oh, Darrow, you missed the ultimate boon. The hero has achieved what he set out to do, and now we're in the return phase. So yeah, refusal of the return, but then the hero's gonna get going on his journey. So then we have the magic flight. That might be more temptation. That's true. I mean, again, they overlap. So the magic flight. Sometimes the hero must escape with the boon, if it is something that the gods have been jealously guarding. Okay, so Campbell says, if the hero in his triumph wins the blessing of the goddess or the god, and is then explicitly commissioned to return to the world with some elixir for the restoration of society, the final stage of his adventure is supported by all the powers of his supernatural patron. On the other hand, if the trophy has been attained against the opposition of its guardian, or if the hero's wish to return to the world has been resented by the gods or demons, then the last stage of the mythological round becomes a lively, often comical pursuit. The flight may be complicated by marvels of magic obstruction and evasion. Ooh, I'm surprised we haven't talked about Neverending Story, right? Neverending Story has a ton of these elements in it. How has no one thought of that, actually? How did I not think of that? So much to do with magic and the challenges, dying and coming back. Literally, I mean, Atreyu literally dies and comes back. The guardians of the Oracle. I mean, Neverending Story is totally really good hero's journey. Demon Blight says, trying to think of a meet the goddess moment for Luke. Yeah, Demon Blight. I would definitely. Definitely. So the magic flight examples that are given here, similar to what we've been seeing. So Frodo and the giant eagles. So they're rescued and they literally go on a magical flight, getting home. And then, I don't know, this says Sherlock Holmes is immediately returned by the author to 221 Baker Street after solving the crime. with the intermediate journey going unmentioned. Sure. It's magical flight because we skip a non-important part of the narrative. All right, why not? So we have magical flight. Now we have, and there are just a couple more of these. Then we have rescue from without. Just as the hero may need guides and assistants to set out on the quest, often he must have powerful guides and rescuers to bring them back into everyday life, especially if the person has been wounded or weakened by the experience. That is to say, the world may have to come and get him. For the bliss of the deep abode is not... Okay, again, this is Campbell. For the bliss of the deep abode is not lightly abandoned in favor of the self-scattering of the wakened state. Society is jealous of those who remain away from it and will come knocking at the door. If the hero is unwilling, the disturber suffers an ugly shock. But on the other hand, if the summoned one is only delayed, sealed in the beatitude of the state of perfect being, an apparent rescue is effected and the adventurer returns. Okay, so this is very similar to magical flight, or the magic flight, but needing help or being taken. Ooh, yeah, that's a good point, Eridance. Yeah, and I think this would cover things where like you are forcibly, you have to leave because something is collapsing, being destroyed, etc., etc. So here it says, from rescue from without, the examples it gives are sort of rewinding a little bit for Frodo. He's tempted to keep the ring, but Gollum takes it from him. So that's his rescue. All right, sure. and then Han Solo coming with the Millennium Falcon to distract Vader so Luke can destroy the Death Star. But that's... sure. Why not? So rescue from without. So again, some other factor getting the hero to leave the place of challenge, to go back home or to travel there. Just some external element. Oh yeah, to overcook for sure at the end. Yeah, Frodo was like, screw it, I'm keeping this ring. And then Gollum had to bite off his finger. All right. Then, the crossing of the return threshold. The returning hero, to complete his adventure, must survive the impact of the world. So it's getting back home and sort of being able to go back home successfully. The first problem of the returning hero is to accept as real, after an experience of the soul-satisfying vision of fulfillment, the passing joys and sorrows, banalities and noisy obscenities of life. Why re-enter such a world? Why attempt to make plausible, or even interesting, to men and women consumed with passion, the experience of transcendental bliss? As dreams that were momentous by night may seem simply silly in the light of day, so the poet and prophet can discover themselves playing the idiot before a jury of sober eyes. And then on and on and on and on and on. So this is sort of like a... Here it describes it as like a final test to reintegrate into society. And of course, at the end of The Lord of the Rings, we have that super weird addendum, right? We get rid of the ring, Aragorn becomes king, all of these important, momentous things happen, and then they go back to the Shire, and Saruman has set himself up as a gang boss of the hobbits, and they have to beat him and kick him out. It's like, it's bizarre. Totally bizarre. But it's sort of a final way of going back and getting back into right. And again, it's certainly not always successful depending on the story and where things are. But yeah, it's the idea of reintegration. Can you go back into the world that you left at the beginning because you have changed and witnessed and gone through so many things? And yeah, not all heroes can. Next, Master of the Two Worlds. For a human hero, it may mean achieving a balance between the material and spiritual. Sam was the true hero. I'll go along with that. The person has become comfortable and competent in both the inner and outer worlds. So freedom to pass back and forth across the world division from the perspective of the apparitions of time to that of the casual deep and back, not contaminating the principles of the one with the other, yet permitting the mind to know one by virtue of the other is the talent of the master. The cosmic dancer, blah, 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 blah. So it says here, by the time of Return of the Jedi, Luke has become a Jedi Knight. Okay, so it's just there's mastery of what you learned on the way, which is sort of the opposite of the one previous. But again, not all stories go exactly the same way. Yeah, Eredinsky's definitely looking for stories that end with a return to not necessarily a return to normalcy, but a return to the world the hero left at the beginning, and reintegrating successfully, but not necessarily in the exact same way as he was at the beginning. I think might be a one way to describe it. And here, let's get the final one is freedom to live. In this step, mastery leads to freedom from the fear of death, which in return is the freedom to live. Bum, bum, bum. The hero is the champion of things becoming, not of things become, because he is. Because he is. He does not mistake apparent changelessness in time for the permanence of being, nor is he fearful of the next moment, or of the other thing, as destroying the permanent with its change. Nothing retains its own form, but nature, the great renewer, ever makes up forms from forms. Thus the next moment is permitted to come to pass. Oh, Demon Bite. Yes, absolutely. Caramon, who at the beginning seems like the dumb hick warrior, definitely goes through a lot of these changes and evolutions. I mean, you start Dragonlance and you're like, oh, Sturm is clearly going to be the hero and going to become the knight and all this other stuff. And it's like, not quite. So the examples here in Return of the King, peaceful resolution is illustrated by the hobbits prospering in their homeland. Yeah, as we've talked about, I mean, Sam, sure. Gandalf and Frodo sail to the Undying Lands. Blah, 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 blah. Rise of Skywalker sees Rey bury the past and reject any power her grandfather held over her. Okay. So again, freedom to live is moving past... Yeah, Tanis. All right, I get freedom to live. It's whatever... Even beyond the specific challenges the hero faced, whatever deeper meaning that held, the hero can move past that and... Yeah. Okay, sure. It's all good. And then, so that is the hero's journey. So if you weren't familiar with it before, or all of the different steps to it, that is. So again, it comes into departure, initiation, and return. Those are the three acts, if you will, and then all of the specific steps there. Demon Light. Yeah, the ending of Tolkien stuff is always really weird. I think people have talked about, again, like C.S. Lewis, all of Tolkien's stories are supposed to instill us with Christian ideals. And I think part of that has to do with sort of, I don't want to say eternal suffering, but always sort of eternal challenges and keeping your faith against adversity in different ways. But yeah, arrogance, yeah, like a return to normalcy, however that might look. And again, so Campbell wrote all this stuff in 1949. Other people have taken this idea and played with it more over the years. So we had David Leeming in 1981, some other dude in 1990, more recently in 2007. So just sort of refining and giving different explanations for these things, grouping them, taking them apart. Yeah. And as I said at the top, while not all of this is, it's not all provable, and as we've certainly discussed, a lot of it is very, it's amorphous to the point of, I think Ayrton said, like cold reading, essentially. It does point to what we as humans can appreciate and enjoy in stories, which is why we see it in George Lucas, in Michael Ende, in the Never-Ending Story, in all of these other things, in Sherlock Holmes, sure, why not? But yeah, we can see these elements because we sort of reverse engineering it. We as audiences like to see heroes go through these things. We want to embrace the idea that we, living in our mundane everyday lives, we could potentially get that call to adventure, leave our normal lives, encounter the supernatural, the greater power that's out there, confront it, confront our fathers, gain their power, You'll notice that there's not a big emphasis in Campbell's description of the hero's journey on finding love, and that's not part of the end of the journey either. It could happen along the way, but it doesn't have to, and there's just that one step in there. It's more about temptation than actually finding any sort of love that you'll settle down with at the end of the journey. It can happen, but that's not like a big step in there. Yeah. So again, keep all of that in mind as we go on, because like I said, on Monday, we will start reading the Epic of Gilgamesh, see what we see about the hero's journey there, in what is essentially the oldest story written down from mankind, which is cool. Yeah, exactly, Erdansk. I mean, there are so many steps that Campbell lays out, and they are so amorphous that you can basically take any heroic tale and and work it in there somehow. Yeah, so starting on Monday, on Mythology Monday, we will be reading the Epic of Gilgamesh. Very excited. Haven't read it in a while. Yeah. So, as always, if you have any questions about what we've talked about, or if you have, if you're thinking about it, if you watch a movie later today and you're like, oh, this is a perfect example of meeting the goddess, let me know. Hit me up. I'm on Twitter all the time. In the Homebuddies Discord, I've got a room where we can talk about this stuff. Tom Bombadil and his wife, sure, yep. Supernatural elements. Yeah, Erdansk, I mean, there are certainly less than savory ways people can take some of these ideas and some of these paths and use it to explain and justify things that are not good. But we continue on. learning, understanding, and getting some entertainment out of these things. So yes, I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Let me see if there's anybody else who is online that we should toss it over to. This was fun. It's been a while since I've read Joseph Cambell. Again, interesting enough, apparently I got this book 20 years ago when I was in college, which is fun. But yes, yeah, the movies couldn't. I mean, geez, for how long those movies were, they didn't get everything, but then other things they expanded to an insane degree. Dovercook, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I hope everyone is doing well. I don't know if I have any viewers specifically down in the area of the storm today, but my goodness, I mean, seeing that stuff on the news is just crazy. All right, we'll raid Ven. Why not? Send it over to them. Thanks everybody. This was super fun. I always love talking mythology and looking at different versions of things and different stories all over the place. Tomorrow is Figure Friday. Don't know exactly what we'll be doing tomorrow, but it should be fun. And then what else? Tomorrow afternoon will be Dune with Jessica. Saturday will be Homebuddies stream at night. I don't know offhand what it is, but I'll find out for tomorrow. I'll let you know then. Otherwise, what else? Anything else? I think that's it. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for chatting with me. And we will raid Ven in just a few seconds. So yeah, and again, if you want to continue the conversation, Homebuddies Discord, Twitter, and yeah, we can definitely talk about it some more. All right, raiding Ven now. Have a good day, everybody. Bye bye. Okay.